Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and look who's back. We've got the Aussie Wrecking Crew doing more things on Australian rock. Today's topic, we are going to talk about two great Aussie debut albums that you must listen to before you die. So, in the channel, we've got Bicycle Legs. Hello, Daniel.
Hey,
Harrison, good to see you.
Hello, hello. Good to
And
be back.
Mr. Peter Wicks, Wixie Leaks in Victoria. How are you going, mate?
Not too bad. Always good to be here.
Fantastic. Same format as always. We pick one album each, have a bit of a yak about it. Portion of the show, we'll talk about honourable mentions and we'll take it from there. So I'll throw it over to you, Bicycle Legs. What is your first pick for an Aussie great debut album that you must listen to?
absolutely. Thanks, Peter. And I little challenge for the panel here. My two main choices have something in common besides being great Australian debut albums. So I'll be interested to see if any of you can pick up on what that commonality is. My first one is going to be a debut album that came out in 1980. This band would become a lot more famous with some later releases and particularly some big hit singles. This first album, much less commercial and much more sort of experimental and odd, but I love it to death. Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf. And yes, I got that whole title out without tripping over myself. By Models. Terrific debut. Melbourne band. That's not the commonality, although my two bands do actually have that in common, but that's not what I was thinking of. Um, this is great music. It's spiky, it's post-punk, it's got a lot of synth in it. Um, you know, Sean Kelly has that really strange sort of vocal style. He's he's also playing not just guitar on this album, but he's playing clarinet and he's playing, these sort of really weird little clarinet lines in a number of these songs. You have songs like there were no singles off this album, but the promotional song that they did a video for was a song called Two People Per Square Kilometer. And it's a really, really good song. But you've also got Strategic Air Command, which I think is a really great song. That's the thing about this album is it's odd and off kilter and prickly at times, but it's also kind of upbeat and bouncy in a lot of ways as well. So it's a strange sort of stew you get with this band on this first album. You get the wonderful Pull the Pin, which has Mark Ferry, the bass player, doing the vocal on that one. Pade Pedestrian is really good. Kissing Round Corners, um, Uncontrollable Boy is really, really cool. It's just really great. It's very post-punk. If you like that sort of music, Australia wasn't necessarily sort of known for that sort of style of music. It didn't sort of really get into the mainstream here the way it did, say, in the UK. But yeah, that's my first choice is Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf by Models.
Wow, I'll send you a check in the mail for getting that right twice. Well done. I think the Models started to get people's ears pricked up on the radio with I Hear Motion. And
Yes.
it might have been the Young Einstein movie, but definitely that was the single where people go, wow, this band's got game. But a lot of folk think that's their best album. Would you think it's probably their best album?
The debut.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very close. It's very close. Those first three albums, I think, are all really, really good. I'm not so much into the more commercial models when you get into your Out of Mind, Out of Sight and that sort of thing. Although I still think Barbados is a really cool song. But
Yeah.
um, I like the more sort of experimental out there models that you get on those first three albums and the wonderful Cut Lunch EP as well.
I always thought those later albums, Sean Kelly would always have a few tasty tracks like King of Kings. Peter Wicks, what's your first pick?
I'm going to go with an album from 1996, Regurgitator. to Plang. For those of you who only got into Regurgitator at the unit stage, which was the second album, this one's quite a step back in time. To Plang in Thai means jukebox, and it sounds like a jukebox. It has that many different styles of music on it. It just plays like it's a jukebox playing different bands. So the first song I heard of it, and I was in the UK when this came out, it was one of the singles called "I Sucked a Lot." I don't know if you need to edit that out, Pete, but that was one of the first singles, and that is a song that is just absolutely made for radio airplay, the tune and everything. Only thing is the lyrics guaranteed that it wouldn't, which is quite gutsy. But to me, their best song off it, "Kung Fu Sing," which has lyrics that would probably make Frank Black proud. It's about the fortune cookies. So it's a bizarre subject. And that song finishes off with sound effects from, I believe it's Mortal Kombat, the video game. Other top tracks are Pop Porn, which is basically a parody of rap music at the time, which was all very misogynistic and whatnot. And it's a brilliant parody on it. Music is Sport, which compares concerts to games like grand finals and Olympics, and that works well. And also Blubber Boy, because you just can't resist the tune. It's just awesome. So that's my first pick.
Cracker. I saw them in the day on that tour, and they are fantastic live, really energetic. And they're sort of, I don't know, Daniel, I kind of have a bit of a Devo feel about them because I think they're pop's greatest ironists. There's a lot of social commentary and satire in Regurgitator.
It's funny you should mention that, Peter, because I saw them in Adelaide in 2009, and they were opening for Devo. So
perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. But there's so much humour.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly the second album has a real Devo-ish feel to it, Unit. So
yeah. I'd probably put Unit a fraction above because I love some of those songs a little bit more. They go a little bit more synth poppy, a little bit more, what would I say? A little bit more punky, a bit more spiky.
Yeah. And I just love the title of the song formerly known as. I think that's
yeah.
And on Unit, I love the fact they knew that they were going to get some blowback for the change in direction. So they started the album with a song called "I Like Your Old Stuff Better Than Your New Stuff."
Yeah.
We could do a show every week on that, couldn't we, Bicycle Leaks? That's all we ever do. We just talk about bands and we love their old stuff better than new stuff. So, yeah, should be a regular theme. No, great. That's a good one. Harrison, what's your first pick?
All right, so we got a couple picks that I've talked about before, but we've talked more about the artist than the album. So first up, from 2003, Delta Goodrem, Innocent Eyes by Delta Goodrem. So a piano pop tour de force. The first half of this album runs like a greatest hits. You've got 5 number 1 singles in the first 7 songs, in contrast to our previous one where there were no singles, and then the back half runs more like a sort of deep cut. Now there is admittedly a lull point at songs 8 through 10. It is a 14-song album from the CD era, but it finishes off with some good stuff. The more gentle, A Year Ago Today, Will You Fall For Me. My favorite songs, definitely Running Away, sort of an up-tempo acoustic number with at times multiple deltas singing layered over each other. Innocent Eyes, the title track, it's got a bit of a harder edge to it, atmospheric. The last song written for the album, actually, and predictable, the most rocking of the bunch.
Yeah, Lost Without You is a great song. A great song is a great song. And do you think that, have you got any of her subsequent albums?
Not studio, but I've got her 4 live DVDs, and there's one from her second album, and there's one from her third album, and there's one from one later down the line.
Yeah, like that album just sold like hotcakes. That was on radio, and it was like one of the top sellers. But the subsequent albums haven't done as well. And there was so much.
Mistaken Identity was definite. The second one was definitely a bit of a drop in quality. I don't mind a lot of the stuff from her third album. I believe that's a self-titled. After that, I'm not really familiar at all with much.
Yeah, like Out of the Blue and various things like that. Look, I think a great song's a great song, whether you like the artist or not. And I do recognize there's some really tasty pop songs on that first album. I think she tried to break into the UK and the US, but not quite successful. So I think she'd be a perfect candidate for that show that we did about artists that should have been huge, but not necessarily so. But yeah, she's a kind of a triple threat actor, presenter, all that sort of stuff. All right.
Yes,
thank you.
Plays piano, sings, even plays guitar occasionally.
Yeah, fantastic. All righty. All right. This band, power pop band, formed in 1979. Two brothers. One first name Jeremy, the other name Peter. And I'm talking about the great Sunnyboys. Oh. And this is the debut album from 1981. I love this album. How would I describe this album sonically? I think it's got the heritage of British music, like you've got a bit of Kinks, there's a lot of Beatles. I even hear a little bit of the Animals and the Yardbirds. And their power pop is up there with anything that was in the day. You know, they were competing, you know, with your Cheap Tricks, the Knacks, and the Beat in regards to the power pop stakes. It is such a wonderfully assured album. Two main tracks off that were Happy Man and Alone With You. Now, the thing that makes this album so great is Jeremy Oxley was only 20 years of age, and you look at the lyrics, and it's somebody that's a very old soul. You know, you read the lyrics and you think that this guy is very thoughtful, observational, expressing his feelings, and you wouldn't imagine that, you know, a lot of these songs were probably written, a lot of the lyrics were written when he was a teenager, and he's performing it when it was 20 years of age. The band is incredibly accomplished. So you've got Jeremy on lead vocals, Peter Oxley on bass, but the great Richard Bergman on guitar. Tasty melodic lines, Bill Bilson on drums. They've got game all the way through. So talking about Happy Man as an example, a lot of the lyrics are very dark. So you've got a song like Happy Man where he goes, I think I'm swimming in a sea of doubt, but I'm a happy man. So all the lyrics have a duality. You think it's all sunny melodies and power pop, but when you break the surface, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of darkness, and this guy is actually exposing himself and putting his raw emotions and what his inner thoughts are. And it's quite a sort of an unusual album for a power pop album, and that's why I think it's got such longevity and why it's regarded as a bit of an Aussie masterpiece. There are wonderful songs. Gone, with the beautiful haunting melodies, that's a Peter Oxley composition, and the searing guitar solo of Richard Bergman. I'll say it again, his guitar work is so sublime on this album. Tunnel of Love, Let You Go, I'm Shaking, I Can't Talk to You is a wonderful song as well. So a lot of the melodies are just, it's melodic, driving pop beats, power pop, a little bit of new wave. But at one hand, you think you're listening to something that's kind of from the late 60s, but on the other hand, you're listening to something that's quite classic and timeless, and I don't think it ages. I saw the very final Sunnyboys show 2 years ago. It was a very sad and melancholy occasion, but it was also wonderful and a celebration at the same time to see that this band, especially with the issues that, you know, Jeremy has gone through, which is on public record, and I won't get into that, to, you know, have that long stay in the wilderness and come back and reunite with the band and have that little second wind at the end. It's a real sort of a story indeed. Anyway, the Sunnyboys from 1981. This is a masterpiece. And Daniel, I know you're a fan of this band and album. Do you want to have any quick words to say or add what I've said?
I don't know there's much I can add to that. I just remember being a kid and hearing Alone With You for the first time, probably on Countdown, and just falling in love with it instantly. And the only other thing I will say is, to this day, I am kicking myself because about 12, 13 years ago, I had a chance to get the yellow vinyl pressing of that album for about $50, and I didn't get it, and I'm still kicking myself for not, because it goes for sort of hundreds of dollars now. So yeah, but it's a terrific album. It's a great choice.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. Bicycle Leagues, what's your number 2 pick?
Okay, my number 2 pick is, as I said, also a Melbourne band. It's from 1982, this debut album. It's, again, something really odd and out there. And again, a band that would evolve their sound and become more sort of commercial as they went along. And it's the self-titled album by Hunters and Collectors.
Yeah.
I love this album to death. I was listening to it again this morning, as indeed I was listening to that first Models album this morning, and it just struck me with how creative this album is, because there's bits of sort of bands you can relate this to, things like Gang of Four, especially the first 2 Gang of Four albums. Um, there's parts of it that are very Remain in Light era Talking Heads. There are parts of it that are quite sort of krautrocky from the 70s and that sort of thing. In fact, their second and third albums they would record with the legendary German producer Conny Plang. So yeah, it's a terrific album. It's an album plus an extra. You get like an extra disc. You get a second disc that has 2 extra songs on it. So I always thought that was rather cool. It starts off with Talking to a Stranger, and that was their debut single, or they'd put out an EP, I think, just before it. But I remember seeing the clip and hearing Talking to a Stranger. I would have been like 11, 12 years old, and thinking, what the hell is this? It didn't connect with me at all at the time. It took me a few years before I really sort of realized what this band was about. And it really took seeing them in concert for it to really connect with me, because this band were an incredible live band. And I got to see them in 1989, and they played a show on the Gold Coast with Boom Crash Opera, Crowded House, and Split Ends. And that was the lineup. And it was just one of the best shows I've ever been to in my life. But, you've got songs like Alligator Engine and Boo Boo Kiss and Run, 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 which ends the album. It's really great stuff. There's a lot of things going on. There's horns in some of the songs. Of course, horns would become a bigger part of the band as they kept going. But you've got Mark Seymour's got this vocal that's, not an easy listen for the first time listener, because he's very strident in the way he sings. And I love that about it. But again, it was something that I had to get used to. You've got guitar, you've got sort of weird, creepy synthesizers, not so much, they're often there for sound effects as much as they are for melodic lines and things like that. And you've got a percussionist as well as a drummer in this band early on. And like, the percussionist isn't just playing regular percussion instruments. He's doing things like whacking the side of like gas canisters and things like that to make percussive noises. And so it gets that bit of an industrial sound to it as well. It's an incredible album. If you only know Hunters and Collectors for the later stuff, the sort of the hits, the Holy Grail and Throw Your Arms Around Me and things like that, go and check this album out, because I think you'll have your head blown by it, because I think it's an absolutely brilliant album.
Good stuff. I've got a theory on what you said about the commonalities between the Models and the Hunters Collectors, where I think you've got 2 bands that start off with a very abrasive album or very uncommercial album, and towards the later part of their career, they have a single or a turning point where their sound gets a little bit polished and they become appeal to a broader audience. So I don't know if that's what you were thinking about the commonalities, but that's where I'm sort of taking similarities between those two bands, Bicycle Legs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there is that. I think musically these two albums sound quite different. The Morals album is a lot sort of bouncier and lighter.
But it's uncommercial. That's what I'm saying.
But it's definitely uncommercial, yeah. No, I'll tell you what the commonality between those two albums is they were both engineered by the legendary Tony Cohen, who also, he did a lot of work with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and things like that. So, he's kind of a legend of underground Australian music.
Yeah. Okay. I think with Hunters and Collectors, they defined a certain sound that's very Australian, and it's very much on the percussion and bass. Bass is really up. And I think they do pick up on the Gang of Four. I think Gang of Four has influenced so many bands, especially in the Melbourne scene. And, you just look at some of those bands that came out of the 80s, even on the pop side of the ledger, like Big Pig, where it's just percussion and bass and a vocal line over it, very minimalist. And I think a lot of Hunters and Collectors, even though it had the horns, is very minimalist. There's a lot of air between the notes. And it was only interesting you were saying about Mark Seymour. I only think it kind of towards the later part of his career that he tried to sing and croon, even though he's a little bit pitchy. Like you listen to a song like Throw Your Arms Around Me. It's not a perfect pitch song, but people give it a lot of kudos because it's heartfelt and sincere and all that sort of thing. But he's not like the greatest singer, even when he's trying to sing. What do you think of that, Daniel?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think later on, I think he got more control over his voice. But, I think sometimes that's a little overstated. You listen to this album, I don't think he sings any bum notes on this album. He definitely is singing with there's an earnestness and a keenness and an exuberance to his voice that maybe pushes the limits. But I think it's sometimes overstated about him sort of, being pitchy and that sort of thing. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I don't mean that as a bad thing. I sometimes like perfect imperfect. Things don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a good singer to be, great.
Yeah.
I think he's a really strong vocalist. He just has an unusual and unique pitch. It's but what he does with it is fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know. I tell you what, I've got a soft spot for Human Frailty. I love that album. I know it's a commercial breakthrough, but that's killer. And I spent many sweaty gigs at that Selena's where they could cram everybody humanly possible. It's like that Model song, 2x2, every inch. And just to get a bourbon and Coke at the bar, just forget about it. Just stay where you are. And it was like a communion. The sort of the interaction between the band and the audience was it was probably at that Angels level. They had a really good sense of community, but they were very much a Melbourne band, Daniel. But after Human Frailty, they became an Australian band, and they started to pull huge crowds in Sydney. Alrighty, Harrison, what is your number 2?
All right, from 1991, Baby Animals, self-titled, an album that just rocks. I mean, half of this album is on the radio or really well known, and the other half is just as good. Kicking off with a 1-2 punch, Rush You, Early Warning. You know exactly what you're getting into, but they've got some softer songs as well, stuff like Painless, One Word, and it works really well. Susie's powerful voice is dripping with charisma. No matter what she's singing, she does a great job of it. I love Working for the Enemy, a bit more atmospheric. I love the up-tempo, balls to the wall, out-and-out rocker, Closer Ain't Gonna Get. One of my favorite parts of this album is actually at the end of One Too Many, where you think it stopped for a second, and then this thunderous drum and guitar breakdown just comes out and just knocks you over the head for about 30 seconds or so before the song finally finishes.
We've spoken about Baby Animals previously, and it's been a bit of a head scratch as to why she wasn't bigger. Do you think the reason why she didn't make it in America is that America already has Pat Benatar?
Possibly. I'm sure my age is really showing here. I don't know how popular Pat Benatar was in 1991.
There's got to be, phenomenally successful album in Australia. Phenomenally. It was
the greatest selling debut album of all time in Australia until Jet came along and knocked it off. But personally, I think this is better than Jet.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great album, and I've seen her live. She's got loads of charisma, but it's a bit of a head scratch why she wasn't bigger overseas. And I know that the Van Halen tour that was subsequent, but you just think on the strength of that album alone, she had the image, she had the band around her. So that came out in 91. So hair metal was still big.
Yeah, it was sort of that transitionary period between hair metal and grunge. It was
before Nirvana. So
it was an odd period because Metallica did well with their album there, and then Iron Maiden had Fear of the Dark and didn't do too well. It was a very odd time for music, those early 90s.
So do you think she falls in between the cracks? Because you had Nirvana, the big tidal wave of grunge coming, but you still had hair metal, and maybe America didn't know who do we classify that? Because they're not exactly metal baby animals. I always classify them as just rock.
Yeah, definitely. I think actually that's a pretty good point. Yeah, because they're, hair metals, like they started out in 89, hair metal was still around then. And then, before they had the time to really like establish themselves, were going into grunge, and they're not grunge. So I think it was just the wrong time, just a really short window of that they couldn't establish themselves. They stopped recording after their second album.
It's all about timing, and she was married to Nuno from Extreme. So all right, thank you for that, Harrison. Peter, what's your next pick?
Well, speaking of Jet, I'm going to go with Get Born from 2003. I love it, and it certainly kicked things off for them. They became massive. I think sold over 3 million copies of this album. It's just a fantastic album, and it's a real hark back to the early days of Angels and Akadaka and Aussie pub rock. It was produced by David Sandy, who's a guy who'd worked with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Slayer. He did Undisputed Attitude for Slayer and Helmet. So they had a pretty big producer, and I just think it's an album that just kicks butt. It shows it has your hard rocking songs, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, which of course was massive. And then you've got the ballad, Look What You've Done, which I think is one of the better tracks. I think it's their best album, although I do like Get Born as well, despite it getting
Shine On, I think.
But Shine On, yeah. Shine On, man, yeah. Sorry. And but yeah, I just think it's fantastic. The other thing, I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's a thing on Australian Story. There's a thing on Australian Story about their original manager, a guy by the name of David Powell, and just as they hit it big in the States, David Powell got a brain condition. I don't know. I think it was a tumour or something like that, and basically became unable to manage them just as they hit it big. Like he'd done all the pub years with them, and then just as they hit the big time, he was basically knocked out. But it's a great story because they stood by the guy, and they made sure that the record company that they signed up with for the US distribution paid this guy as well. So yeah, it's anyway, fantastic album.
I think it's a solid album. I own it, and but it wouldn't have been as big without that lead single.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not. It's got a lot of good rock chops, but I actually prefer their second album, Shine On, which flopped. So if we ever do a show about second albums that should have been bigger, that would be one of my picks. But yeah, look,
I don't think it's a bad album. I think it's got about half of it I think is really, really good. I think it's just too long and runs out of steam with It's a long album. It's from the CD era. I think it's like 12, 13, maybe 14 tracks. But yeah, there's definitely some great stuff on there.
Jed, that album has gone platinum in America. So it sold a few copies, and they did a co-billing tour with the Vines, and they were really getting a little bit of audience traction up and down America. So yeah, they were definitely raising the flag of Aussie rock, and this is around the time where there was a little bit of a garage rock explosion in the in that period, where you had bands like the White Stripes, the Hives, the Strokes, and Jet seemed to fit in. So kudos to them.
The public spat with the guys from the Strokes didn't do any harm either. That certainly got them plenty of publicity.
Absolutely. All right, thanks for that, Pete. Speaking of legendary bands, I've got to talk about this band. They started out in the early 80s, and I'll just get straight to it. The Church of Skins and Heart. I love this album. It's probably, when you look at the album, you probably look at one song and you think The Unguarded Moment, which is a masterpiece. It's a piece of perfection, jangly pop. It's got a little bit of Beatles, Steve Kilbey, but there's so much more to this album. This is the most new wavy power pop album of the Church before they became a little bit more dreamy and more of a landscape with their soundscape, with albums such as Starfish and Priest Equals Aura. But this one was where they were more concise with sort of 3-minute, 4-minute songs, jangly, dreamy pop, power pop. Some of the songs are great. For a Moment We're Strangers, the wonderful arpeggio chords of Marty Wilson Piper that push the song along. And you've got these really nice, cool, detached vocals of Steve Kilbey. Steve Kilbey, it's a bit similar to your Bicycle Legs, where you're talking about the Models and Hunters and Collectors. Different vocals in that early album comparative to when Steve Kilbey was starting to sing more in Heyday and Starfish. But he's got this real sort of English clipped, detached vocals all the way through. Chrome Injury, this is like a 70s glam stomp. It sounds like David Bowie. Steve Kilbey's a huge David Bowie fan. You can hear a lot of it through this album. Memories and Future Tense, Spiky New Wave, Bel Air, Dream Pop, a little bit of a glimpse to what you'd hear with the Church in some subsequent albums. She Never Said, Angular Post-Punk, Spiky, and Don't Open the Door to Strangers, a Kilby Martin Wilson Piper song, which is haunting poetry and balladry. Lyrics like, don't open the door to strangers, don't let them into your heart. The thing about this album, like the Sunnyboys, is these guys were so young, but you listen to it and the playing and the songwriting and the arrangements are so assured for a debut album. It's not like they're learning their craft. It's like, bang, straight out of the gates, they've come out with something which to me is really kind of great. So of Skins and Hearts, I don't know if it's the best Church album. Probably for me is Heyday and Starfish, but it's a bloody good album, and it definitely comes into the category of a great debut album, The Church of Skins and Heart. Do yourself a favour, because it is it's a bit of an outlier in the Church catalogue, because it sounds a little bit different to the rest of their catalogue. Daniel, are you a fan of this album?
Oh, I love it. I was actually reminded of that album this morning. I was scrolling through Facebook, and one of the groups I'm in is Vinyl Hoarders United, and somebody posted that album this morning, and I thought, that's a good choice. But I had a feeling you might pick that one. So, yeah, no, it's a terrific album.
Bicycle Legs. Why don't we talk about honourable mentions? We'll go around.
Okay.
What's your...
I've got a bunch, so I'll go through them really rapid fire. Talking about bands that were influenced by Gang of Four. Domestic Harmony by Do Re Mi. Great album. An album that Peter Kerr and I have talked about on my channel, so please check it out if you haven't seen it. The wonderful Hoodoo Gurus with Stone Age Romeos. These next couple we have to talk about. Flowers by Icehouse. self-titled by In Excess. Another great album that's kind of post-punky, and this band would get much more dance floory as they went along. It's the first Machinations album. Really, really good album, Esteem. Zero Echo Autumnal Park, great synth pop album. You know, Australia wasn't really known for a lot of synth pop, but that's a great one. One of the all-time great pub rock bands, Radiators, Feel the Heat. Great debut album.
Peter Wick's favourite, that one.
And then the last two, Peter and I have done a show right here on Rock Daydream Nation, and if you haven't seen it, you need to go and see it. We talked about these two albums right here. I'm Stranded by the Saints and Radio Birdman's Radios Appear. So, yeah, those are my honourable mentions.
Killer, 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 no filler. No dispute there. Harrison.
All right, so the one main album that I'm going to talk about, not very long, but Living Loud's debut album, the supergroup with Barnes, Morse, Lee Kerslake, Bob Daisley, Don Airy, Steve Morse, that is, when I say Morse. I didn't include this on my list because it's their only album, so calling it a debut album it doesn't exactly fit with the rest of the other debut albums I had. But no, that's a great album. Half Ozzy Osbourne covers. Barnes's voice works surprisingly well. Well, I say Ozzy Osbourne covers. It's really Kerslake and Daisley covers, since, you know, they were involved in the writing, but, you know, they are Ozzy Osbourne songs, and then the other half are really good original songs.
Fantastic. And Peter?
Well, I had a whole bunch, just like Bicycle Legs. Some of them the same. Hoodoo Gurus, definitely. Amel and the Sniffers. Crowded House, whether you call them Australian or Kiwi, I don't know. Ice House, or The Flowers, as they were back then. Dave Graney and the Coral Snakes. Machine Gun Fellatio, UMI, and Silverchair. I don't think we can skip Silverchair. That was a big one. Vance Joy, and one I thought you'd pick, Pete, The Vines.
Fantastic. Yes, I would definitely include those. I'm only going to include two because you guys have included a lot that I would have chosen, but I might go with Flash in the Pan. Did that on a recent show with Martin Popoff, which is, George Young and Harry Vander's solo project. It's so witty, wonderful. Hey, St. Peter, Down Among the Dead Man. That's a great song, Lady Killer.
Legend.
This band, Daniel's already said this. I'm Stranded the Saints, and I'll just lug this quickly up. The I'm Stranded box set. Do yourself a favor and get that. One of Australia's greatest albums. Whether it was the first punk album, proto-punk or whatnot, it was definitely way influential, and it's just a stunning album. So the Saints. Well, there you have it. Thank you, Bicycle Legs, Harrison, Peter. We've covered all the debut albums, great ones that you should listen to. There are plenty more. You'll see the crew doing a show very soon. We'll talk offline and we'll find another topic to cover very soon. But one thing's for sure, leave your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Cheers and all the best. See ya.